Hi there, and welcome to Master of Horror. These are 3 true Wendigo and paranormal stories in the Ring, number 23. As you should know, I have chosen only the most scariest true paranormal stories that I've ever come across. Some of these stories are of my own experiences. Please like and subscribe, it really helps the channel. Now, my friends, let's begin. Scary, true, paranormal story number 1, The Haunted Apartment. In 1990, when we temporarily lived in West Virginia with my grandpa, many unexplainable things occurred. At night, the sound of dishes being thrown across the kitchen would wake us up, only to find the kitchen in perfect condition, and all the dishes were never moved. This happened for many nights. Most of us would feel as if something was constantly watching us. I was only about 7 years old. Yet I do remember as if it was yesterday. My grandpa would hear my mother call him from the kitchen area, but when my grandpa would walk over to the kitchen, it was empty. We would hear doors being slammed open and closed, and noises like keys being placed down on a table. My mother would see something black in the hallway, and it would then vanish. We would have nightmares constantly. It came to the point to where we decided to move back to Texas. My grandpa decided to stay in the apartment for another week. We eventually left. My grandpa stayed and invited one of his friends to stay with him. It was a working buddy of his. He claims that the same night that he was alone at the apartment with his buddy, they were drinking, sitting on the floor, having a great time. He was making fun of the hauntings that were occurring in the apartment, and they were just drinking. Just then, something picked him up and threw him against the wall. He bounced off and fell to the ground. His friend ran out of the apartment, and my grandfather followed right behind him. That same night, my grandpa decided to leave Virginia and drive back to Texas. He said while he was driving back to Texas, around 2 a.m, something was following him in the sky. It looked like a big black bird with red glowing eyes. It was swirling around the car in circles. The creature then swooped down and ran directly into his windshield. He said it had a man-like face. My grandpa slammed on the brakes, and the creature then pulled its head right back out of the windshield and flew off into the darkness. He pulled over at a gas station and had to have his windshield taped up. He was able to make it back home, and we all came out of the house when he pulled in the driveway. There was a huge dent on the hood of the car, and there was a hole in the middle of the windshield. This happened in 1991, and even though I was only 7 years old, I remember everything. Just to let people know the paranormal is real, whether you believe it or not. Scary, true, paranormal story number 2, Ghost Girl Folding a Blanket. When I was about 6 years old, we lived in a trailer in Rosenberg, Texas, and my mother would watch over me and my little sister while my dad went to work. One morning, my mom was making eggs in the kitchen while me and my sister were in my mom's room. My sister was asleep on my mom's bed while I was coloring in a coloring book. I was facing the wall standing up, and my sister was on the bed right behind me. I just remember feeling as if something was behind me, and I heard a small noise. So I turned around, and I was shocked to the core and caught by surprise. There was a blue-looking girl around 12 or so staring right at me. She was slowly folding a blanket, looking right into my eyes. She had black, long hair, and it looked wet. Also, it looked as if she was wearing a nightgown. This ghost-looking girl was inches away from my little sister who was asleep on the bed. I smiled and I said hi to her out of fear and waved at her. I slowly turned back around towards my coloring book, and deep inside I was petrified. I started coloring again, yet my mind was set on running out of that room. I was so afraid of this girl catching me while I was trying to run away. Yet, I counted down from 5. As soon as I got to 1, I took off out of the room screaming. My mother was in the kitchen and she turned towards me, wondering what happened. I explained everything to my mother. At first, she didn't believe me, but she eventually decided to go look in the room. She went into the room where I saw the girl, and nothing was there. Just my little sister sleeping on the bed. My mother told me to stay out of the room. After about 10 minutes, I then slowly walked up to the doorway and peeked into the room, and nothing was there. I then walked in and looked around the room, and to my shock and surprise, there was a wet spot right where the girl was standing. I looked towards my little sister, and there was a blanket on top of her. It was the same blanket that the ghost girl was folding. Scary, true, paranormal story number 3, The Goat Girl. While I was driving down the highway one night, headed home from working late at my job, I came across a young woman standing on the side of the road. I pulled up to her and asked her if she needed a ride, and she then nodded her head up and down and smiled at me. I opened my truck door and she hopped in. As we began driving down the road, I asked her where she was headed, and she told me to just go to the nearest town, which was about 20 minutes away. This girl looked young, maybe around 18 years old, and she did not talk the whole time. I decided to play some music, so I put my tape in the cassette player. After about 3 minutes of listening to music, I reached over to turn off the cassette player, but I accidentally hit the eject button, and the cassette tape fell onto the ground of the truck. She looked down at the cassette on the ground, and so did I, but I was driving at the same time. So, as I held on to the wheel with one hand, my other hand reached down to the ground to pick up the cassette. I was looking at the road, and every once in a while I had to look back down to the floor to grab the tape. The cassette tape was right next to her feet. As I looked at her feet, I was shocked to the core. What I saw to this day has petrified me. What I'm about to tell you is something that only the brave can handle. This girl had goat legs and goat feet. Her legs had fur and her feet were hooves. I was in shock and my eyes opened wide and I could feel my face go numb. I quickly looked at her and she was staring right at me. She knew that I saw her legs. I sat back up really quickly, and through the corner of my eye, I could see she was still staring at me. I couldn't stop shaking. She then started laughing. I can hear her laughing and giggling, yet through the corner of my eye, her mouth wasn't even moving. I slammed on the brakes and reached over quickly, grabbed the handle to the truck, and I opened the truck door. I lifted up my leg and I kicked her out. She flew out of the truck. I then slammed on the gas and took off. I was driving the truck well over 100 miles an hour down the highway. I looked over to my left out of the window and her face was looking right at me. She was flying and gliding right next to my truck window. How was this even possible, I thought. She was cursing and yelling. I could hear her screaming through the window. I drove even faster, and I don't know how fast I was going, but it must have been fast because she vanished. I made it to the nearest town. I got off and had to get my composure together. I was traumatized, and to this very day, I still am. Thank you for listening to Master of Horror. These are 3 scary, true paranormal stories in the rain, number 23. If you like what you've heard, please like and subscribe so you can get more great true paranormal stories with rain sounds. Well, my friends, good night. And don't forget to leave the nightlight on.